Now back to the show. This is The Law Show on CL 650.
She's gone, I better learn how to face it. She's gone.
All right, another great choice of our intro music here. The Law Show on CL 650. We're talking about family matters, family law, people breaking up, ultimately getting divorced. And in our last segment, I wanted to talk about kids and parents separating, getting divorced, and custody. Mm-hmm. So this is something that has got to be quite tricky. Who gets the children? How long they get the children? How you divide that? How you have to still work together after. I mean, when you have children involved, you don't get divorced and you never see your spouse. You might just be through email, but you still have to have contact. So let's start at the very beginning. How is custody determined?
There's only one test that's determined, and that's whether it's for guardianship under our Family Law Act or the Divorce Act custody. It's what's the best interest of the children. What is best for them? There's no presumptions of joint or joint custody, I should say. There's a presumption of joint guardianship in that if you live together with the other parent, with the child, you're deemed a guardian. But there's no presumption of who has what responsibilities or time. It's what's best for the child.
So who decides that?
As I said earlier in this show or previous ones, I prefer it be the parents that make the decision because they know what's best for the children. But if they can't, a judge will make that determination. There's you can look at some precedents, but it's very fact driven. The only guidance is that, as I said, the best interest of the children, and under the acts that both parents are to have maximum time with the children based on their best interest.
So I'm sure you get one parent who says, well, the best interest is for them to be with me.
Yep.
And the other one says, well, the best interest is with me. So how do you square that?
Well, you know, if the parties really have a dispute that they can't get around they can't decide what's best, you can hire a third party, a psychologist, to prepare a report that says, here's what I recommend would be best for these children. Generally, the older the children are, the more likely it's going to be equal time between them.
Okay, so how does that work for, say, 5 and under?
The closer to 5, the more likely it will be equal. The courts have varied a lot in the last number of years to getting to be more parties having equal time, even with really young children. The only age group that's really difficult is those under 1, because the mom's still on mat leave in most cases, and they may still be breastfeeding. And so that can be a bit trickier. And there you have more time, more times during the week, but for fewer hours. So maybe 5 times a week or 3 times a week for 3 hours instead of a full day. But as the children get to be 2, 3, 4, you should be getting overnights. And after 5, you should be getting closer to an even split on the time with the children.
I see. I think it's pretty young. But
it does seem that way. But what we forget is, unlike, say, our parents, probably, if you're anything like me, Zach, my mom basically did all my childcare. My dad worked, and he came home. I saw him in the morning when he said, bye, son, and I saw him at like 6 at night when he got home. My mom did everything. Whereas now, dads are actively involved in the children. They take him to school. Like, I've dropped mine off at school ever since he was in grade 1 because my wife works downtown, and it's easier for me to do it. We're involved in active care. We pick them up from school. We take them to their activities. And so it's getting to the point that it shouldn't change just because you're not with the spouse anymore.
So you have these situations where, you have parents that want to work it out.
Yep.
And then you have those that don't. And then that's when it goes to court. So what's the percentage you think that try to work it out?
At least 3/4. You may have interim applications as for interim residence of the children, depending on a number of factors. The main reason that you go to court is if you want to move, it seems to me, because that's a difficult one to try and.
No, what is moving determined? Like, is it from Richmond to New West, or is this from Richmond to the Okanagan?
More Richmond than the Okanagan, because as long as you can still exercise your parenting time and not have a real issue, a real snag in it, for the most part, moving within the Lower Mainland is not going to be a move. It's going to be, if you're moving outside, that's going to really throw a wrench into whatever arrangements you have.
And the courts can block someone moving?
They can, although they've put in systems so that you have to the other party will have to try and stop it if they don't have primary residence, because usually it's best for the child to stay in a situation that's similar to what it was before.
Okay, so you're looking at the best interests of the children. Now, what sort of exceptions are there? So most people are doing the 50-50 split when they get to a certain age. I mean, when I was growing up, it was like I saw my mom every second weekend sort of thing, and I spent most of the time with my dad. So do you get that anymore?
You do in some cases, but usually there's a reason for it. Maybe one parent lives farther away and can't, or it can be a situation that one has some difficulties, whether there's addiction issues or whatever, and they can't have the children half-time, or their job may not allow it. But you can craft schedules to get maximum time with. Every second weekend is kind of going the way of the dodo bird to some extent. So
when there are these disputes, is it best to call you instead of just going to the court and just try to sort of play mediator on this, or what happens there?
Well, I think it's good if both parties have a lawyer. It may temper their position to some extent because you can tell them, look, that's probably not going to fly. If I had a guy come in and the child was 2 months old and says, I want half-time, week on, week off, well, you're not going to get it. So why spend $50,000 or so to fight it when you're not going to have it? The two lawyers can probably come up with something that we could gradually move to the higher amount. So say, for example, the child is 2 years old and your client wants a shared situation, and mom is saying, no, that's not really going to work for a child that's 2.5. You may say, okay, for the first 6 months, it'll be this schedule. And then for the next 6 months, there'll be another one. And then by the time the child's 4, it's kind of an even. So there's ways to craft it, and it just takes negotiation and wanting to get the deal done.
I anecdotally heard about a woman that had her children at home and was on assistance and lived in an assisted apartment, quite a nice place, so a government sort of run facility. Social housing, that's what I'm looking for. And was really reluctant to give the husband more time with the child,
lose the house.
Even though the grandparents would say we'll be there, and the child, because their situation would change. Like, can that legally fly?
Well, it's an interesting one. Then what is best for the children? Is it having the mom in that situation lose
the nice place to live,
and have to go to less nice housing, for lack of a better term, or is it better for the children to have time with both, even if it costs the mom decent housing? So, that's a factor that I'll go in. And if that was a situation in one of my cases, I'd probably tell, if I acted for the dad in that situation, that, you got to look at what's best overall for the children. It's not just what's best.
The other part was that he wanted to reduce the amount he was paying in sport.
Well, what I'd probably say is, look, if you want to have your full-time or your half-time, maybe you don't reduce the support issue, and then she won't lose her house, potentially, and then everyone's happy.
Right.
There's ways to, if you think outside the box, you can come up with a solution that'll work for everyone.
Do grandparents have any rights?
They do. They can bring an application, but usually the grandparent is subject to the right to what the parents think is best, because the parents make the decisions for the children. Because
you might have, I've just used an example. You mentioned, your office is in Surrey, and you have a large Indo-Canadian community there, and many generations sometimes live in the same house, right? So the grandma or the grandpa has been integral into the upbringing of the child, and they're no longer included. So how do you square that?
That's a very tough one. It would be the same in mine. My mom's looked after my son in after-school care since, he was... My wife went back to work, so that'd be a difficult one. It's what's best for the children overall. The grandparents may not have the automatic right to claim, but if there's a situation where they have taken care of the child on an ongoing basis, and after a separation, one party said, "I'm just not letting you see the
grandparents."
Yeah, you can see the child, but you can't take them to your parents. In that situation, I'd probably say to the grandparents, you have a pretty good case to say that that's inappropriate unless there's a good reason.
Well, then sometimes you get in these families that live together, the source of the divorce was the mother-in-law or something. I mean, these things do happen.
Yeah.
So someone can say, well, yeah, you can see the kids, but your mom can't see them, right?
Yeah, and that happens a lot in a situation where, say, one of the parties has died, not necessarily in one of my cases, because unless you put a stipulation that you can't, in an order or an agreement, that the other parent can't take the children to see his parents, he or she'll do it anyway. Mm-hmm. And so the grandparents see them through with time with the other parent. Mm-hmm. It's when one's dead and the other one just cuts the other side of the family out that it usually ends up being an issue.
Okay, now what about traveling and vacations? Yep. You've always got, okay, that's not split. Okay, spring break's coming up now. It's 2 weeks. I want to take the kids to California for 2 weeks. How do you get around those sorts of things?
Usually what happens is in your agreements or orders, you split the time. You split 1 week. Just like at Christmas, you may split the 2 weeks that way.
But could you give up one in the summer to get it in the spring? This one is negotiable?
Yeah, and usually if one has a specific reason.
Like, say, going to Europe, for example. You're not going to go unless you're going to go for 2 weeks. Not worth it, right? Yeah. If you're going to take the kids on a big holiday.
Yeah, and usually, the courts will allow it if the other party's is being, obstructionist, so to speak. The courts will say, look, here's an itinerary, here's the time, the flights. They'll allow it to go because it's good for the children to travel. And
you need the waiver, because I've crossed the border and they roll down the windows and they see the kids there, and if I'm on my own, where's the mom, right?
Yeah. Well, again, that depends on the border guard and the age of the child. Flying is a lot more difficult. Usually, you'll need something more there than on the border. And of course, I always get one when I travel with my son if I'm alone, and I've never been asked. Of course, now he's 13, so it's a little different. But I've traveled when he was like 8, 9 years old, and he was never asked.
Well, I went to get passports, and they said, where are your kids? And I said, they're in school.
Yeah.
Where's your wife? I said, I don't know. I don't know. I didn't know where she was. But he was drilling because he wanted to know if I was trying to get passports for my kids so I could leave the country
take off,
with them.
Yeah. Well, when my son had to have his renewed, and so I went down with my wife, and he goes, oh, yeah, his father's here. I said, the way he said his father's here, she thinks that we're not together. He goes, oh, yeah, she never thought of that, but that's a family law humor. We always know that.
Well, family law humor, that's a whole other show.
Exactly.
Like, first there's lawyer jokes, and now there's family law jokes. I'm sure you've got a few. Yep. David Halkett, always great to see you, and hopefully next time you're feeling a little better. You have a little frog in your throat today. So you struggled through, and kudos to you. From Macquarie Hunter and McQuarrie.com, right? Is the best way to do it. And you're in the heart of Surrey. Yeah. And easy to find.
In the middle of the Lower Mainland as well.
Exactly.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. That's Family Law on The Law Show. I'm Zach Spencer. Speak to you next time on CL 650.